I'm Dan Bergs. Join us as we explore the fascinating shipwrecks of the Northeast by diving Wreck Valley.
Welcome to Dive Wreck Valley. Today we're down in Jersey and we're going to be exploring the wreck of the Adonis and the Rusland. So stay with us. Dive Wreck Valley will be right back.
The new Aqua Explorer dive reel is a 5-inch diameter reel that contains almost 300 feet of a 1/8 diamond-braided nylon line. This reel's heavy-duty anodized aluminum construction with all stainless steel hardware is made specifically for the rigors of saltwater wreck diving. Accept no substitutes. Ask for the Aqua Explorer wreck reel at your local dive store or call Aqua Explorers at 516-868-2658. The Wreck Valley dive team suits up to explore the 2 shipwrecks beneath the shallow waters off Long Branch, New Jersey. The site is one of the most popular beach dives in the area and is commonly referred to as the dual wrecks because both the wreck of the steamer Rusland and the remains of the sailing vessel Adonis are intermingled on the same site. The site is located directly behind the Esfonso Retreat House. Unfortunately, due to the recent actions of some unruly divers, this site is now off limits to beach divers, and access to the wrecks are now only permissible by boat. Please note that this show was filmed prior to these new regulations. Howard Rothweiler, co-writer of the New Jersey Beach Diver book, and Carlos Narciso, both avid Jersey beach divers, will take our team on a tour of the dual wrecks. The wrecks sit in 20 to 25 feet of water, approximately 200 yards off the beach, and just north of the small jetty's tip. We utilize Amphibico video housings to film all the underwater scenes of Dive Wreck Valley. Before long, we're all suited up and we start to head down towards the beach. Carlos carries the float-mounted dive flag for our team. A dive flag is not only the law, but it helps to ensure that passing motorboats are aware of the presence of divers. Dive flags are absolutely mandatory when exploring any of New Jersey's shallow water shipwrecks. Note that Carlos walks backwards into the surf in order to keep his balance. Carlos will navigate out to the wreck first. His plan is to attach a dive flag to mark the wreck's location. This way the rest of the divers can find the site easily. Fortunately, parking is fairly close to the beach, and our divers only have to walk a short distance to the water. The sea conditions today are almost perfect, with only a small surf. Wind and weather play an important role when planning any beach dive off New Jersey's shore. We plan all our dives here when the wind is out of the west and the surf is low. Once in the water, our team uses the jetty rocks as support while finishing to gear up. While we continue to make final gear adjustments, Carlos has already marked the wreck's location. Before we descend, let's take a look now at the history of the Adonis and the Rusland. The Adonis was built in Bremen, Germany in 1853 and displaced 550 gross tons. She was owned by F. Best & Company and was valued at $20,000. The Adonis was en route from Newcastle, England to New York and under the command of Captain Bosey when she struck the beach at 11 p.m. during a heavy fog on March 8, 1859. The Woodhull vessel was carrying a cargo of 124 grindstones, 600 lead ingots, flint, soda, powder, and red dye. Her entire crew was taken off by rescuers from life-saving station number 4. The wrecking schooners Rheingold and Nora were dispatched to the scene immediately. Steam pumps were fitted to the vessel's hold to try to reduce the water level and refloat the Adonis, but these efforts were soon abandoned due to rough weather. On March 18th of the same year, the vessel broke up in the pounding surf. 18 years after the Adonis had settled into the sandy bottom, the Red Star Line steamship Rusland ran aground on the same beach. The Rusland was built in 1872 by Dundee shipbuilders in Scotland and originally named the Kenilworth. She was 345 feet long, had a 37-foot beam, and displaced 2,538 tons. At 11:20 p.m., On March 17, 1877, under the command of Captain Jesse de Horsey, the Red Star steamer ran aground. A moderate gale was blowing from the northeast at the time, and a heavy sea prevailed. According to a statement from Captain de Horsey, the Rustland had sailed into a dense fog. The weather was thick, with an occasional snow squall. At 9 o'clock, 20 fathoms were found, and sea cakes were brought up. As these cakes had never, to my knowledge, been found west of Fire Island, I concluded that the vessel was off the Long Island coast. 25 minutes later, the lookout cried, "Light on the port bow." I thought that a mistake had been made by the sailor, as there should have been a light off our starboard bow. I telegraphed for the vessel to be put about. Before this could be done, however, she struck. According to the New York Times, the vessel headed straight on the beach and keeled to the starboard side. She filled with water immediately, and from the volume which rushed in, it's supposed that she must have struck a rock, making a hole in her hull. The Rustland was carrying 200 passengers and a cargo of plate glass and ironware from Antwerp to New York. Rockets were discharged, which attracted the attention of life-saving stations number 4 and 6. After many fruitless efforts, the lifesavers finally succeeded in getting a line over her bow. The apparatus for propelling a life-saving car was quickly attached, and the slow work of hauling passengers ashore started. By 10 a.m. the next morning, all the passengers and crew had been transported to the beach. Only 2 people could be conveyed in the car at a time. At first, salvage crews anticipated no problem in pulling the liner off the beach. It was later discovered that the ship had actually struck the large grindstone cargo of the sunken wreck of the Adonis, which had come ashore almost 20 years earlier. On April 8th, the Rustland finally gave in to the constant pounding of the shore breakers and broke in two. This wreck, along with the wreck of the wooden schooner Adonis, are together known as the dual wrecks. They now sit in 25 feet of water just offshore and north of the tip of the jetty. This area sketch was done by Howard Rothweiler for the New Jersey Beach Diver book. The sketch shows the way the wreck sits in relationship to shore and the jetty. Navigation from the shore to the wreck is fairly easy because the wreck sits parallel to the beach and provides a large target for divers to navigate to. Diver Dan Lieb created this beautifully detailed sketch of the two wrecks after years of diving the site. Dan also utilized and reviewed the video we shot of the wrecks to capture every detail in his final sketch. It's highly recommended to study these sketches prior to exploring the wrecks, as they'll help put what's observed by divers on the bottom into perspective, as well as provide basic navigational information. The Rustland's bow is facing north. Her boiler provides the highest relief on the wreck and is easily recognizable. By following her propeller shaft south towards the Rustland's stern, divers will find her broken steel propeller almost on top of the Adonis wreck. The Adonis's broken down remains lie at a right angle to the Rustland, with her bow facing shore. Divers can easily recognize her cargo of huge grinding stones. Stay tuned. When Dive Wreck Valley returns, we'll be submerging to begin our exploration. Explore the shipwrecks off New York and New Jersey in Dan Bergs' Wreck Valley Volume 2 book for $18.95. Or try Dan's exciting new how-to book on wreck diving, titled Shipwreck Diving, for $12.95. Both books are heavily illustrated in full color. Send check plus $3 postage and handling to Aqua Explorers Inc., 516-868-2658. Call for our free catalog. As we descend, we immediately start to navigate offshore. Visibility is pretty good today, considering the shallow water and mild surge. Whenever diving a new location, it's always wise to take a compass bearing straight out from the beach. This basic navigational information provides the direction to and from shore. As we continue offshore, we spot a spider crab on the sandy bottom. These crustaceans are quite common in the area and are observed on almost every dive. A little further offshore, I spot a hermit crab. In all my years of diving, I have never observed a hermit crab exit its shell, take a stroll, and then return to claim its home. My only thought is that it was looking for a larger shell. As we get closer to the wreck, we find a congregation of spider crabs all grouped together. Who knows, maybe it's their mating season. Finally, the wreck seems to materialize out of the distance. Howard leads the way and begins to take us for a tour of the Ruslin's broken down, scattered remains. We are now on the south end of the wreck and immediately recognize the Ruslin's broken three-bladed steel propeller. Before continuing, Rick Schwartz takes a moment to photo the propeller for a future book project. As we start to head along the Ruslin's port side, Rick finds a diver's lost pole spear. We've not seen many good-sized fish today, but apparently these wrecks are at times home to some decent-sized blackfish. Diver Mike McMeekin brought a banded spear gun on his dive. It's not long before he speared a decent-sized blackfish. Once filleted and cooked, blackfish provide thick, white, tasty meat and are one of the most tasty local seafoods available. Mike's objective today is only to bring home dinner, so he adheres to a self-imposed limit of only 2 fish per dive. The Ruslin was a steel-hulled steamship, and today her steel hull plates have collapsed and are now lying level to the seabed. The Ruslin's propeller shaft provides perhaps the best navigational tool for divers. Divers can simply follow the shaft to either the wreck's propeller or boiler to get their bearings as to their location on the site. It's also good to note that the propeller shaft lies parallel to shore. Rick also finds that the shaft provides good structure for framing underwater photographs. The Ruslin's propeller shaft is heavily coated with marine growth and is supported off the bottom with several struts, which allow divers to swim beneath the shaft. On the wreck's port side, we spot 2 steel propeller blades. We're not quite sure whether these are spares for the Ruslin or just part of the Ruslin's cargo. The shallow wrecks in this area are at many times almost completely blanketed in marine growth, in this case, baby mussels. The mussels are so dense that at times, low-lying wrecks are hardly even recognizable. As with most shipwrecks, after a short time on the bottom, the wreck's structure is transformed into an artificial reef, supporting an entire ecosystem. Here, common starfish take advantage of the abundance of food provided by the dense mussel population. The starfish pull the mollusks open, then eat the shell's contents with their inverted mouths. Other sea life, like these plankton-eating anemones, also thrive on these shallow water wrecks. A little rarer to the area is this sponge, which also seems to be thriving on the Ruslin site. Brass and copper pipe seem to protrude from almost every hole on the wreck. Most of these pipes have been hacksawed off by divers, working either for souvenirs or for the metal's scrap value. Near the north end of the wreck, we find the Ruslin's boiler. Seaweed moves gently back and forth in the ocean's gentle surge. Divers must also learn to work with, rather than against, the forces of the ocean. This boiler is also a key landmark for divers to use as a navigational reference. In the boiler area, the bottom is literally covered with coal. Rick again snaps a photograph before continuing his exploration of the wreck. The photographs Rick takes, as well as all the video footage, were reviewed by underwater illustrator Dan Leave when he created this beautifully detailed sketch of the wreck. You will note that our divers are wearing single Sherwood 120 cubic foot tanks for today's shallow water dive. These large volume tanks provide more than an adequate air supply for the extended bottom time, as well as the long swim to and from this wreck site. We're now heading astern, again following the Ruslin's propeller shaft. We find where Carlos had attached our dive flag. In this case, he simply clipped off his dive reel to the propeller shaft's strut. Continuing astern, we spot a horseshoe crab, scientifically referred to as Limulus polyphemus, amongst the wreck's low-lying debris. Rick spots the glimmer of brass and stops to pick up a small brass flange. Howard is now leading us towards the wreck of the schooner Adonis. As we approach the Adonis, Rick spots a brass spike sticking out of the debris. A little hammering is all that's needed, and the bent square deck spike is freed from the wreck. The artifact is then quickly stored in Rick's mesh bug bag. The Adonis wreck is completely and distinctly different from the Ruslin. The Adonis is wood, not steel, and has nothing that protrudes more than a couple of feet off the bottom. The Adonis's low-lying wreckage is testament to the relentless power of Mother Nature and the years she spent on the bottom. The Adonis's wooden beams and ribs are fastened together with brass pins and spikes. For years, these spikes have become sought-after artifacts for divers. Many of these spikes are very hard to remove, but occasionally divers get lucky and find a loose one. Rick continues to take photographs documenting the wreck's condition. These grindstones are now the only visible remains of any cargo the Adonis was carrying when she ran aground. They are still stacked just as they had been stored in the Adonis's cargo hold 135 years ago. These grindstones are quite large and seem to have a diameter of about 4 feet. The grindstones also have a square borehole, and at times can be almost completely blanketed in baby mussels. Rick stops to examine a polished brass flange protruding from the mussel-covered wreckage. The brass probably remains shiny from divers who continue to rub it each time they pass. Lou's keen eyes spot the small tip of a brass spike sticking out of the sandy bottom near the Adonis's bow. Lou quickly pulls one spike out of the sand, then starts to dig again, looking for additional artifacts. Within only a few moments, Lou finds another loose spike. Both spikes will be preserved and highly polished as mementos of Lou's dive to the dual wrecks. Meanwhile, Howard starts to dig along the Adonis's port side. Howard is also looking for artifacts and fittings. After only a few minutes, Howard uncovers one of the Adonis's wood deadeyes. Deadeyes are prized, sought-after artifacts for divers. They were commonly made of lignavite, one of the world's hardest woods. Deadeyes were used in the rigging of sailing vessels, and this one looks to be in near-perfect condition. Once one artifact is located, it's always wise to continue to dig. Howard expands his existing hole, slowly fanning away the sand. After only a few more minutes of digging, he pulls out the broken rim of a brass porthole. Too bad it wasn't intact, but Howard has nothing to complain about. It's not often that a diver finds a deadeye on a wreck that's visited by literally hundreds of divers each year. As Howard continues to dig, expanding his existing hole, Rick spots the neck of a bottle sticking out of the sand. Unfortunately, the bottle turns out to be broken, so Rick leaves it before continuing his exploration. Howard, still digging in the same hole, pulls out a nice brass faucet, like the type used in a bathroom sink. Many of these artifacts have been uncovered due to the wave actions of recent storms. At times, seaweed seems to roll in with the tide, reducing visibility on the wrecks greatly. On the other side of the wreck, we spot a brass spike that other divers had already started to work. Ed Jenny starts to work on the stubborn spike, which is still firmly mounted in place. Howard has left his hole to join us, but on his way he spots another spike, still fastened into the wreck. Luckily, the spike is fairly loose, and with relatively little effort, is quickly pulled from the wreck's wooden beams. Ed is not quite as lucky, and is still busy trying to free his stubborn spike. Lou also joins us on the Adonis's starboard side. He too spots a spike sticking out of a waterlogged wooden beam. Lou tests the spike, and when it moves a little, he knows that it's just a matter of applying a little muscle to get the job done. By now, Ed has convinced everyone to put in a team effort on retrieving his spike. The spike is still firmly held in place, but with a little extra effort, it too is quickly removed. Unfortunately, due to our air supply and the long swim back in, it's now time to head back towards shore. Divers planning to visit any of New Jersey's beach-accessible shipwrecks should always start to swim back to shore while they still have an adequate air supply. Rick now leads the way, crossing over the Rustlin wreck and then steadily swimming towards shore. On our way, we once again pass a group of female spider crabs. Spider crabs can completely camouflage themselves by digging into the soft, sandy seabed. And although they look almost prehistoric, they're really completely harmless. Stay tuned. When Dive Wreck Valley returns, we'll be taking a look at the artifacts we recovered from the dual wrecks. The new Aqua Explorer dive reel is a 5-inch diameter reel that contains almost 300 feet of a 1/8 diamond-braided nylon line. This reel's heavy-duty anodized aluminum construction with all stainless steel hardware is made specifically for the rigors of saltwater wreck diving. Accept no substitutes. Ask for the Aqua Explorer wreck reel at your local dive store or call Aqua Explorers at 516-868-2658. After over an hour of bottom time, it's finally time to exit the water, and slowly each member of our team makes his way out of the water and up the beach. Howard swims in on the surface, towing his lift bag, which supports the artifacts he recovered today. This dive was one of the most interesting and historical beach-accessible wrecks I've ever explored. To have a passenger steamer and a wooden schooner accessible to explore only a short distance from shore is not only fun, but convenient. Even with the additional load and drag of his lift bag, it's not long before Howard walks out of the surf, dragging his artifacts with him. As we exit the water, our divers can already be heard planning for their next trip to dive one of the fascinating historical beach wrecks off New Jersey's coast.
Let's do it. We did it right. There's a deadeye.
Oh, it's gorgeous. Where'd you get it?
Right where the two wrecks join on the inshore side. Yeah, I was lucky. I had a good hole there. I got a couple pieces out of it.
In the sand?
In the sand, right next to the wreck, yep. So, I think there's a little bit more exposed now, and that's probably I got closer down near the hard bottom.
That's gorgeous.
That's why I picked up a few pieces, you know. Here's a piece of brass thing.
Beautiful.
I don't really know what that is.
As a whole, our dive team did quite well today. By far, Howard's deadeye is the most unique artifact brought to the surface. This deadeye will be cleaned and preserved and then proudly displayed in Howard's ever-growing artifact collection. Even the brass spikes and fittings will polish up beautifully to make fine mementos of our dive to the wrecks of the Adonis and the Rustland. After posing for a quick photograph with our artifacts, it's now time to head for home and plan our next wreck diving adventure. For further information on the shipwrecks off New York and New Jersey, pick up a copy of Dan Bergs' Wreck Valley Volume 2 book at your local dive store. Or to learn about the skills of wreck diving, try Dan's how-to book titled Shipwreck Diving. To order a VHS copy of the Dive Wreck Valley show or a free color book catalog, call Aqua Explorers Incorporated at 516-868-2658. Dan Bergs' Dive Wreck Valley is sponsored by Amphibico Video Housings, Dewey Dry Suits, Sherwood Scuba Equipment, Sea-Pro Scuba Equipment, SSI, Scuba Schools International, Subsalve USA Lift Bags, Torpedo Manufacturing Propulsion Vehicles, Night Rider Technical Lighting and Video, Beneath the Sea, one of the largest expositions in North America, Boston Sea Rovers, the Dive Boat Rebel, Hudson River Metal Detectors, Treasures Unlimited Metal Detecting in East Patchogue, Seahorse Dive Shop in Queens, The Enchanted Diver in Floral Park, and Kings County Divers of Brooklyn. I hope you've enjoyed the show and will join us again as we continue to explore the fascinating shipwrecks of the Northeast by diving in an area known as Wreck Valley.